Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Powerful Man Show. I am your host, Doug Holt, with my co-host, the man, the myth, the legend, Coach Mark Smith. Mark, great to have you here, brother. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. I used to work with some guys in Cape Town, and they used to say to me, they'd say my name, Mark, and then they'd say, the man who knew too much. And I just thought it was something they made up. And then the other day I was looking on Turner Classic Movies, and then I saw The Man Who Knew Too Much is actually a movie title. So
You're like, wait a minute. Now I know what they were saying.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, I'm excited. We've been talking about this for a little while. And the importance of, having a clearing conversation. And you know as well as I do, one, how important these are to have, but also so few people know what these even are. And so I want to dive into that with you if I can today. And maybe we just start off with, well, what the heck is a clearing conversation?
Yeah, and I really get what you're saying. I guess having been in the people development world since the age of 26, I have been having clearing conversations since that age. So I forget that people haven't kind of considered what that would be. So a clearing conversation is exactly what it says it is. It's about leveling the playing fields. It's about getting on the same page and taking out of unspoken thoughts, feelings, and maybe a vibe, you might call it, the elephant in the room, taking it out of the shadows and bringing it forward and putting it on the table so that everybody can see what is at play.
Yeah, I love that. I think, you and I have talked about this before, and certainly on the podcast. I like the idea of clear glass between two people. That visualization, if you can imagine, you and I right now, even though virtually, recording this, there's a clear glass between us. And, over time, things that are unsaid, stories that we create. And I'm a great storyteller, right? And it comes to about other people. But stories we create, that puts a little bit of dirt or mud on that glass between us. And, at first it's a few specks, right? And then eventually that gets clouded. And so to me, a clearing conversation is almost like getting a towel with some Windex or cleaner and then cleaning off that mud and that dirt.
I love that analogy. Really, really great. It's something which, as you say, it starts off with a few specks and then it's a few mud spatters and it gets bigger and bigger. And eventually seeing through the glass becomes a problem. And that's, I think, where people miss each other in relationships. So to use your analogy, if we were to get the Windex out regularly and clear the glass, then we'd be able to see each other more clearly. We'd be able to also read each other's body language more clearly because we're not affected by the having to hide and dodge all of the bits of mud and muckiness which is between us, right?
Oh, absolutely. And guys, in a little bit, we're going to go in exactly to how to have a clearing conversation. So don't worry about that. But for now, at least for me, Mark, what I used to do early on as a young man in my relationships is like, okay, I didn't call it a clearing conversation at the time, but I got to clean this up a little bit. And I would go back and try to wipe away the glass metaphorically, but it would just smudge it, right? It wouldn't go over well. It would make things worse. My intent was to connect with the other person, but we would just battle and hit each other hard, whether it be my dad, my mom, my girlfriends, whatever it may be. It seemed to me like I was just smearing the mud on the glass. And then, as you said, it puts distance between us. We're butting our heads against this. We're trying to connect so hard, yet it feels like even though we're so close, we're miles apart.
Yeah. The interesting thing for me here is that you had the courage to go there. A lot of people realize there's something I need to talk about. Okay, let me speak about men because I can speak from a male's perspective. And when I was younger, and even sometimes to this day, if there's a really contentious issue or something, there's fear in the way of, I need to confront this, not that this is a real thing. I was going to say, my wife's spending too much money or having a conversation about something like that. actually it's the other way around. It's where I've spent money on buying a motorcycle and now I need to tell her. The thing is, in South Africa, they call it fessing up, or I suppose in America as well, you're confessing. So there's a bit of fear and a bit of anxiety around that in the first place, so firstly, a lot of people avoid it. Secondly, to your point, once we get into the fray, because we don't use a framework or a particular methodology, it's hit and miss, and it kind of often misses, and we end up smudging the glass. So I hear you.
Yeah, well, man, I've definitely smeared the glass quite a bit in my past here. Luckily, I've cleared it up, and we'll talk about the framework in a little bit. But when we talk about, okay, what is a clearing conversation? But what are some other reasons that a guy listening to this right now, he's running on the treadmill, he's out in the trails, he's driving to work. What are some other reasons he might want to consider having a clearing conversation? And on top of that, Mark, who should he have a clearing conversation with?
Okay. I love it when there are two questions, because that just has me trying to fire all my neurons at the same time. Thanks, Doug.
You're welcome. Trying to keep you on your toes, man.
So, the reason would, for me, be a selfish one. So if you think about it, Arthur often speaks about it, your cognitive load. We have open loops. So the one thing is to close those loops so we don't have to keep on thinking about, I've still got to have that conversation, or I've still got to clear that up with that person. So it's for me. And I think I said in the previous conversation we had, my relationship with you has got nothing to do with you. So it's actually got nothing to do with the other person. It's how I feel and how clear is my side of the relationship, because I can't control the other side. And I suppose the other why is that if we are going to build trust and we're going to potentially get into a business relationship or an intimate relationship, over time, the stakes get bigger. So it's really important, especially early on in the relationship, to keep it clear, because otherwise you end up with a dodgy foundation, and then everything can fall about your ears, which is often what happens because we haven't cleared things up. We get to 8 years into a relationship, and then something happens, or somebody gets found out, or there's a breakdown for whatever reason. And all of that mud on the glass is murking the vision so much that nobody can see their way through to a good relationship. To your second question is who. I'd say the most important people in your life first. Yeah. And those are the toughest people to have those clearing conversations with. Often, if I think about my family, what I've experienced is the willingness to almost be a bit brutal with those people that we love, and they can get hurt in the crossfire. And what I would hope is that through a clearing conversation we can avoid damaging those we care about and love the most, as opposed to dumping on them all of our emotional baggage, that we give them some kind of level of respect they deserve, and clear our way forward with them in a healthy way that is respectful to both and doesn't diminish the other person. So and then the people at work and friends and people around us, obviously that would be important as well. And potentially after we've gone through the framework, Doug, I would recommend that somebody start with a relationship where there may be something to clear, but it's not a really vital number one situation, as in life and death. Something smaller to build that muscle before getting to those bigger issues, because it is really important to clear those situations up and those relationships.
That's such a good point. This is kind of like, I can imagine some guys out here going, okay, clearing conversation, I'm going to have one. And it's almost like going from couch to marathon, but really you're going to get your training wheels on, get those off first, and starting with something a bit easier, maybe a good friend or somebody like that maybe there's just something out there that you just want to get off your chest. Maybe they borrowed a tool and just didn't bring it back, or, something simple like that. That's easy to clear up and have that conversation. So you can use the methodology and framework we're about to dive into until it becomes maybe not second nature, but closer to.
Yeah. So interesting. You use that example of the tools. I have a scar on my lip here from getting punched by a guy whose tools another guy had borrowed. He'd spilt paint on them. I helped him clean them up. And then the guy who'd lent them to him just got so irate. And when I was trying to explain that I had nothing to do with it and I was trying to help, he didn't want to listen. He didn't have a clearing conversation with me. He had a clearing right fist.
Oh, wow. So guys, if you got some tools, go
Look after them.
Yes.
don't lend them to anybody.
Yeah. Well, another thing I think before we get into this framework that I think is really interesting, obviously the listeners really know Tim very well. You know, Tim is one of those people that runs to clearing conversations, right? And what I mean by that is whenever there needs to be one, he jumps on it and he looks forward to it. And it's almost like working out, right? You first start working out, you're getting back in shape. You are just so sore. It's painful. You're bedridden. You don't want to do it ever again. And then you get to the point where the endorphins are kicking in. You've been exercising for 3 months. Now you're looking for that little soreness because you know the good is coming after that intense workout. It's going to feel so good. And when I've talked to Tim about it, Mark, he just says, man, I just know how good it's going to feel after that conversation. It's going to be awkward during it, perhaps, maybe not. But then I know at the end of that conversation, my girlfriend, my parents, you know, you, whoever, we're going to be closer. And so I keep that in mind when I'm going into these clearing conversations so I can make sure that I actually have that mind. So it keeps me in flow.
Yeah, I hear you, and I respect that. I respect that hugely. It's something that I look forward to as well, and I look forward to receiving. And my close friends and I, we clear with each other on a regular basis. And in fact, in my family, when I got together with my now wife and her daughter, who's 28 and just announced that she's going to have a baby. So, you know, from the age of 8 years old, she's now going to be a mom. We had clearing conversations every dinner time to figure out, you know, had anything got in the way today? Didn't even have to do necessarily with us. It could be that something she needed to clear up with a friend and she would express it and unburden herself with us. And then we would help her to get clear on what she needed to say to her friends. So she was constantly clearing with her friends at school, you know, from probably not 8, but certainly 10, 11, 12, you know, in the teenage years. She's fearless about speaking her truth. And I think that served her really well. So, yeah, I hear you.
I think that's what a beautiful gift you've given her. And obviously, you know, your wife and everybody else around you. You know, what would you say, and we'll move on the frameworks here in a second. What would you say is your energy going into a clearing conversation? Maybe we'll call it Mark 1.0, Mark in his 20s, I guess, when you started, and Mark 2.0 today. Maybe it's 8.0, I don't know. But, you know, that evolution, your energy going in and your energy coming out of it. How would you describe that?
I think that's a really great question, Doug. The danger for me is to be too intent on having the clearing conversation, and that it might come across as too big or imposing, or you know, I'm going to come and clear with you now. Brace yourself. Yeah. So what's really important for me is, prior to a clearing conversation, that I manage my energy, that I breathe it through, that I've also planned it, that I've thought through what I'm going to say, what I need to experience, that I'm clear that the person in the clearing conversation wants to have the clearing conversation, because there's no way I'm going to do it to somebody. It's a both sides being willing. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's mostly for me, specifically around managing my energy, being clear, also having done some preparation. And then obviously the framework is there to really help. But the benefits for me are, it seems to be like a reset in the relationship. As you say, clearing the glass, it can be moving stuff out of the way. And often that stuff has been lurking for a while. It can feel so much lighter and such a great way to be closer to the person. We also create boundaries, right? So during a clearing conversation, part of it is we can say, so let's figure out how to not let that happen again, so that we're moving forward, we're not falling into the same pothole again. And also, I suppose, what my daughter would call couple goals, so that if it's a joint relationship, so where are we going? We can also use it to create a clearer vision for the future.
I love that. When we look at the benefits of coming into it, because I still get anxious going into clearing conversations. I'm looking forward to the outcome, but as long as I don't attach expectations, I have that engaged indifference. It reduces those. Easier said than done all the time, though, for me.
Yeah.
But the outcomes, guys, what you can be looking at from this, and I'm just going to give you a couple of the benefits, right? You got your health benefits, but here your clearing conversation benefits is you increase the intimacy between you and the other person. Intimacy isn't always sexual, right? So this could be something with your friends, but you're getting closer to them, you're strengthening the bond. But intimacy is also, the first stage. We're doing a master course for the guys in the Brotherhood, a 6-week course on sexual mastery. And one of the first things we're teaching them is about clearing conversations, right? That's the first step really towards intimacy. And the reason being, especially for women, guys, if you're in a sexless marriage, a sexless relationship, this topic that we're talking about is more than likely going to be a major step in getting you back in the bedroom, back to the closeness. Not that it's just about sex, but hey, look, we're guys, we want to have some sex. You want that intimacy, and having a clearing conversation not only allows you to have more sex, but the sex is so much better, right? I mean, you're having more of a spiritual experience with somebody rather than masturbating with somebody else, so to speak, which a lot of guys find themselves in. I know it's crude, but guys talk about it and they get it, right? It's just like, okay, wait, we're not connected anymore.
Yeah.
So, Mark, let's dive into. We've been building the framework, so to speak, of why you should do it, what it is. Let's talk about the how. And I know you've got tons of experience in this, and I know you've got a framework that you utilize. How, I'm ready to do my first clearing conversation. How do I get started?
Yeah. So initially, as I've said earlier, for me, it's about personal management or self-control in a way. So it might be dealing with some anxiety, as you expressed. I too have that. Less so these days than I used to. I used to be very fearful of, having something that could be uncomfortable because it might blow up in my face. I'm a relatedness driver. So if the relationship is damaged as a result of me approaching this, then there could be regrets. And so we get into our head. So one thing for me is get into your body. So I do, I might go for a run or for a walk, or I might do some meditation, or I might even do some jumping. I learned one of the Osho meditation techniques is to just jump on your barefoot on the ground and just literally ground yourself. Breathe and get the emotions under control as well. If it's something that is causing me sadness or anxiety or anger, I'd want to shift those out of the way so that I'm clear before I can go into a clearing conversation. Not so that I'm disconnected, but so that I can be that I can facilitate it from my side, at least anyway.
Beautiful. And maybe let's just take the guys through, if you can, just one example. I love the idea of getting into your body, and most men aren't familiar with that. You're like, get into your body. What the heck are you talking about? You've given a couple of examples, like exercise, right? Whether it be walking, running, the meditation of jumping, which I've never heard that before. So we're gonna have to quiz you later when we get off of this call. But what are some other things that guys can do that are newer to this to actually get into their body, and what does that feel like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I've listened to quite a lot of discourse from this guy called Osho, who was an Indian enlightened master from, he has an ashram in Pune. I don't know if he came from Pune in India. So that was his thing. And he said that in this day and age of very busy lives, we need to have an active meditation. And that's where the jumping comes from. So for me, if I want to get into my body, I could, as I was this morning, I put on some rock music. I was listening to Seether this morning, and I dance and I get into my body. I also do push-ups if I want to get into my body. I've done that since in my 20s. If I get angry and I know I can be explosive, that I'll do push-ups. And these days, instead of doing these explosive, angry push-ups, I tend to do slow push-ups. But they help, with the breathing, it helps me to feel into my body. The other thing that I tend to do is kind of, literally, like we used to before a rugby match, we used to, tap ourselves and get your legs going and actually feel your body.
Yep.
So those are just a couple of ideas.
Well, which is a great example because you talk about sport, right? And me playing soccer or football, as it's called everywhere else in the world, you're constantly hitting yourself, or you're getting ready, you're getting pumped up, you're getting that blood flow. But it's also, to me, it's, as I've gotten older, it's paying attention to what's going on in your body, right? Like most people, if you're listening to this, how do your feet feel? How do your feet feel in your socks if you're wearing them on the ground? And what's going on is, it's another way. I'm like you. I'm more of the guy that jumps on the floor. I'm going to go do push-ups before I have a conversation with my wife if I'm upset, or anybody else that goes through it, just to get the aggression kind of get it out and let energy flow through. So there's a lot of ways you can do it, and it's really just prepping for it. And if you've done sport, like you're talking about rugby, that's a good way of just getting yourself centered, because that actually really gets you present in the moment, doesn't it?
Mm. Yeah, this morning I went out for my Alpha Rise and Shine, and I have never done Tai Chi in my life or been taught, but I did Tai Chi this morning. So I did some stretching and yoga, and I could just feel my body. I had my hands in the grass and in the dirt, and did some Tai Chi moves, felt my balance, sort of tried to see if I could balance on one leg with my eyes closed. And any of that stuff will have you present in your body, right?
Absolutely. I love it. I can picture you doing that. I'm going to have to go.
It wasn't very pretty, I promise you.
I picture you on a wood beam somewhere out in nature, water in the background, doing the crane kick.
I was on a nice vision. I wish I was on a path that was at an angle, so I was losing my balance, and there was a horse in the field across the way laughing at me. So.
I love it. All right. Yeah. So now we're in our body, right? What's next?
Well, the other thing is to set the expectation and to get permission. So, we need to have an agreement from the other person that they want to have a clearing conversation. So it might be, honey, I've got a couple of things that are on my chest that are bugging me, that I really feel it would benefit me to have you here. And I'd love to hear what you have maybe not told me. And would it be possible for us to sit down, at 3:00 this afternoon, maybe for half an hour, and do that in a really constructive way, so you have that calm. You don't try and create that agreement when you're having the previous argument.
Yeah. No. Okay. So I've got her and I've sat her down, and I want to have that clearing conversation with her. And as I'm walking through that and I've addressed it, she may or may not be receptive completely to it. But if we're going back to the previous thing, if you're in your energy and you're in that calm state and you're centered, people seem to be much more receptive, right? Their guard goes down a little bit, which is kind of interesting. So
the key. Sorry, just to jump in on that. The key as well. I really love that connected energy is the first one, that you're both at a similar sort of level. The other one is to use questions, not. I want to have a clearing conversation, and I want you to be there at 3:00. It's asking permission. So it's asking questions. Would you be available? Is there something that you can see value in? It would certainly be important for me. To start with asking questions.
I love that. What I've done in the past, Mark, is I'll pre-frame it a little bit. And come back, and I might say something like, and you can tell me if I'm doing this wrong, but I might come into the situation and say, babe, first I want to let you know how much I love you, and how much. And so I'll come in with a compliment, a sincere compliment, to frame it. And I do that with my wife to take away any fears that may be happening. Maybe we've been in an argument or something, right? And maybe I know that her fear is that I'll leave or whatever it is. So I'll come into that conversation trying to guess the fear of the person and letting them know I'm coming at this. First, I want to lay the framework or the groundwork for myself that I love you. And I want us to be closer. Would you be open to having a conversation about or something along those lines? And if it's not now, and maybe I'm jumping ahead of the framework, and again, but it has been no. It has been the answer I've gotten. And I go, then what I'll do, guys, is I'll ask, well, when can we have this conversation? So it's not an open loop. It's like, okay, we're having it tonight, we're having it tomorrow, we're having it at this time. Because if it's a clearing conversation, it's an important conversation is the way I'm looking at it. And if I haven't framed it right, I may go back to the drawing board and try it again and go, okay, maybe my emotions have gotten the best of me. And so I might try it that way. Am I doing okay with that?
I love the fact that you check in with me. Well, the only way of knowing whether you're doing okay is, has it worked for you, Doug?
Yes. It works really well for me.
Okay, well then that's your answer, right?
I got to ask the master sometimes, right? Coming through there.
So I don't consider myself a master. This is just something that I was taught in my 20s by a phenomenal mentor of mine called Wendy C4, who's passed away now. And we had many clearing conversations in groups. And so, this is in honor of her. She taught me this. And certainly, I wouldn't go up to my soccer buddies and say, "Hey man, I love you," but I love the idea of a preface, to set it up to say, "Hey guy, there's been a couple of things that maybe have been a bit scratchy around lately. Can we level the playing field? Can we get on the same page? Because I'd really like to talk about, how I feel that you never pass the ball to me or whatever,
Yeah, exactly. Those conversations don't go quite the same, right? They don't accept my love. All right, so we've got the framework set in the initial part. How does it go now? How does the actual conversation go?
Well, okay, so we're sitting down then I have in my kitchen, I have this old stressed blue wooden table that I can imagine as we're sitting here. I can imagine myself and my wife sitting at that kitchen table. It's always great for me to have a conversation where you normally meet. The other concept is that it may be too fraught with history. So you may want to have that clearing conversation in a neutral place. So consider the environment that you want to have the conversation in, that it's going to be away from other ears. You don't want the mother-in-law hearing and then interfering, that kind of thing. Or the kids, perhaps, maybe it's an adult conversation. And if it's about your sex life, you don't want the kids to be earwigging.
Yeah.
So is that an expression you understand, earwigging?
I know what you mean.
Okay, that's good. I sometimes get feedback that the expressions I use are very English. So anyway, just stop me if I do. So that's really important, is to have the conversation in a place where you're comfortable. So you get the agreement, you're comfortable. I'd also say that this is a conversation which is confidential. The agreement that we have in this conversation for us both to be safe is that we won't talk about it to anybody else outside this conversation. And if you want to bring something that was discussed in this conversation with me afterwards, then I'd like you to check in with me if that's okay. Because for me, it should be a kind of a circle of complete conversation. And when we leave it, we should be clear, and yet there may be some residue. So it's just to manage those expectations, that if we do need to do a part two, that you just check in with me if it's okay to carry on, or to, because I may want to reset it up as a proper conversation rather than on the fly. I don't want to be ambushed.
I like that. Yeah, I haven't done that one before, that part of it. And I think that's really good, because you're also kind of pre-framing, like there's going to be an end of this conversation. right?
Yeah.
This is not going to be an open loop where we keep complaining about who does the dishes, and it comes up over and over again. We're going to have a resolution to this somehow, some way. Now, maybe later that the resolution comes about, but there will be a resolution to this. And don't air, what I would say is don't air my dirty laundry, or so to speak, anywhere else. Awesome. Yeah. So what's next?
Great. So we've got that part covered. In the actual conversation, it's very structured. So we won't be interrupting each other. We'll each have a turn. So it's really important to tell the other person, especially a lady, or especially if there is stuff that could be contentious between you, that we'll each take turns. It'll be like a tennis match. Not that we're answering each other. So I'm clearing my stuff and you're clearing your stuff, and we don't interrupt each other. We don't tell I've covered that. We don't tell anybody else. It's a confidential conversation. It feels like there's one piece that I'm missing. I'll think about it.
It'll come to you. It's always in the spot, right? As you're looking into it. And then, I think something you told me before is, there's no interrupting coming through here, right? It's not, or the typical, God, I can't believe you want to talk about this, Mark, or here we go again. Those kinds of things that we can do, but also our spouses could do, because they know how to press our buttons better than anybody, and test us as women testing men to see if are we really concrete in what we're about to have a conversation with, and is our energy centered.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. So in my previous life, I had a short marriage, and there was lots of conflict, and it was a very difficult time in my life. And we had many clearing conversations, or I attempted many clearing conversations, and typically there would be sabotage, and she would do exactly that. She would make the agreement up front, and then she would interrupt me, or she would scream at me, or she would roll her eyes. So that just destroys it. And so I think they're also, I'm thinking about it now, there also needs to be a kind of a timeout. Okay, if it's not working, or if it gets too heated, what is our exit strategy? What do we do because it clearly cannot happen in those circumstances. So maybe we do need to have a break and then come back to it, and some kind of agreement up front as to what that, do we just do this time out, and do we agree 15 minutes? Do we agree 24 hours? What's the agreement?
I love that. Something I'll add into that, if I may, is when you're thinking about this, guys, coming into it, let's just say you're having a conversation with your wife. It's your first time doing a clearing conversation. Maybe it's your 100th time. And she rolls her eyes, right? She does that, that nonverbal cue, or she just says something else. What I would do in that situation, is I would stop and say, look, I notice you're rolling your eyes. I'm not available for that level of conversation. If you need to step away, that's fine. But I'm very calm and very assured, because as you talked about earlier, Mark, I'm centered with my energy. And I'm very adamant that that's not acceptable to me. It's not, I don't waver like, oh, please don't do that, or what have you. I'm very clear, like, I'm not available for that level of conversation. If you need to have this conversation another time, another day, or another way, great, we can do that. If we need to step, but this isn't going to happen here, right? Is there something else you would advise to add on to that? Or is that something that you would also throw into your clearing conversations?
I love that, Doug. I'm not available for that level of conversation is a very neutral way of putting it. The other thing for me would also be to, as you said, it could be a test. So it could be a case of, I know that's coming. I know that, this is new for her. She may be uncomfortable. Can I just absorb that? Can I be not in effect of her attempt to push my button? Can I stand my ground and just be breathing? It's okay. I noticed that. Don't say anything about it. Carry on and see if she lets it go, if it was just a test.
Yeah. And you got to remember, Mark, I already know you've shared with me, you're married to an enlightened woman. So, she's probably game to have these clearing conversations. My wife certainly is, but I know a lot of the men, most of the men listening to this, we haven't been taught this as kids or as adults, coming into it. And here we are, 40s, 50s, 30s, 60s, whatever it may be. And now we have two souls coming together to dance in this framework. And men, this is where you get to lead the dance, right? You get to lead the dance of the framework that Mark is going to break down here and showcase that, hey, I've got this. I will lead you. If you don't want to dance, that's fine. You can go sit down, and I can either dance by myself or we can come back dance another time. But you have to be very, very cool with it. That's the word I'll use. You can't get triggered. You can't get fired up because she's not listening to you, because it very likely is a test. It very likely is uncomfortable to her and probably is bringing up past relationships. Maybe, her dad sat her down before her dad walked out on the family. All kinds of things can boil up to the surface unconsciously for her, but also unconsciously for you. So if you come into that, I like that rugby idea of hitting yourself and getting present and having, because I just picture power there, but also coming through this with engaged indifference, where you're engaged in the conversation, but indifferent of the outcome, right? So you're indifferent of how this is going to play out. You want it to play a certain way, but if it goes sideways, you're okay with it because you're secure with where you are.
Yeah, it just goes back to her relationship with you has got nothing to do with you. As you say, Doug, she could be triggered from a childhood memory. And again, it's something that she's just dealing with badly. And it's got nothing to do with you. So why let it change what is a really good idea in terms of clearing up the glass? So, potentially if it's just a minor eye rolling or a sigh or a here we go again kind of thing, it could be a case of reset. The other thing is to recreate the agreement. Sweetheart, we agreed that we would sit down and you gave me permission to have this conversation. And it's really important to me. So can we start again? Because it's something that I would really like to just have your buy-in to before we begin. And I'd love your 100% commitment that we're going to be able to have this conversation. And as you said so beautifully earlier on, Doug, that there's a resolution, there's a benefit to having this. We're going to walk away having learned something about ourselves, about each other, and have a clearer path through in our relationship, whichever way that goes.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I mean, we're getting into the weeds, but I love how detailed you bring this. And guys, we are going to get a little bit more deeper into the framework, but I think these things are so interesting. You use like the sigh, right? When you can see this happen when someone takes a sigh, it's a unconscious response. And I think I think it's the Hindu religion that talks about the 5 hindrances, right? Where the ego can take over, right? And the ego can come in there and try to protect the listener, which would be your wife or your friends even. And they may sigh, right? They may all of a sudden, because one of the 5 hindrances is being tired, right? You can see that when you're in difficult conversations, guys. How often do you get distracted, bored, tired? I mean, you can go down all the 5 hindrances really quickly. And as soon as the conversation's over, all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, I have tons of energy. What's going on here? Just recognize that the ego is at play, if not only for us, but also possibly for your wife, unconsciously. She's not doing this just to be a witch, right? She's not doing this to be mean to you, but she may unconsciously sigh, and that's just her ego protecting her and trying to take her out of the possible pain that she's worried she's going to encounter.
So fantastic that you mentioned the 5 hindrances. I was watching a Shaolin monk do a TED talk this morning, and it was on the 5 hindrances. So that was just so apt.
I've seen that. I've seen that talk. It's a great one.
Yeah.
I love that. Dr. Hart, who's someone I follow as well, he says there's a 6 hindrance. But anyway, we're digressing. We'll get into that another time. But Mark,
so just to go back to the sigh, may I just quickly interject on that? My wife has caught me doing that. And, typically it'll be, I've been doing some woodwork. I've been repairing and fixing up a cottage on our property. And then she'll come in to talk to me about something else. And I'll sigh in a way of changing gears because I'm letting go of the woodwork and the calculations in my brain and trying to figure out why the hell that won't fit. And then change gears to her. And she's taken it as like, you don't want me here. And I've said to her, please just know that it's me changing gears. So it's also, it's also something that I'm very aware of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, conscious relationships. I think a lot of men want to strive to having one, right? And your partner does too, guys. A lot of the women that you're with, there's a reason that so many of these books on relationships are geared towards women. It's because women are really desiring this level of conversation. And it can be scary, right? Both for the woman and for the man. But I think at times for us guys, it's even scarier because society has taught us so many times that you can be hurt and don't show your feelings and all this other BS that we go through. Yeah. But let's just jump deeper into this framework. So I'm excited because I know you laid a little bit of this out previously for me, and it was so eloquent. Give me an example of like what one person would say or another as we go through this framework.
Okay. There's two ways we can do this, Doug. One way is I can share the framework and how it works, high level, and then we can give examples, at each stage. Or alternatively, you and I can have a kind of a mock clearing conversation. Which would work for you.
Yeah, start with the first framework. And now I'm scared because you're going to have a clearing conversation with me. Is this really why you wanted to talk about this?
Doug, I'm glad I pinned you down.
Let's go over the framework first, because I want to give the guys a container that they can come back to. And guys, I encourage you, whatever you're doing, stop if you can, or at least mark this or what have you, bookmark it, so you can come in and come back to the framework that Mark is going to lay out here, because this is something that you're going to want to use over and over and over again. And again, like we talked about earlier, don't start off with your wife or your most important relationship that you have. Start off simple. Start off with coworkers, employees. You can do this with employees and staff. I've done it, and it's been really successful. It's brought me closer to my team, right? And it's made my team actually, they're part of a family now. So you can do this with all kinds of people. If you want to start with a grocery clerk, go for it. Whatever you need to do to practice the framework, cue cards. But listen to what Mark has to say, because this is set up so well that it's almost, I hate to say, almost foolproof as you walk through the steps. So Mark, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Doug. Thanks for that lead in. So firstly, as I said earlier on, in terms of setting up the clearing conversation, it's very important to say we'll each take a turn, and I'll go first, not for any other reason than it will give you the idea of how it goes, so that you can just copy me. And that's, as Doug was saying, it's really a simple process. So the first person, say I'm wanting to have a clearing conversation with Doug, I'd say, we've set it up, we've got the agreement, we're sitting at the kitchen table overlooking the fields, and I'd say, okay, Doug, so what is not working for you? And there could be different contexts to this. Like I said, we used to have clearing conversations at the dinner table with my family. It would be, what is not working for you, or what has not worked for you today? Or it could be, what is not working for you generally, or it could be, what is not working for you, and this is a risky one, about me. And I've had this with my wife. What is not, when she's been a bit iffy with me, what's not working for you about me at the moment, babes? And then she will tell me. And then she tells me. So they love it, because it's an opportunity to unburden. And it goes back to the hidden motives technique. It's kind of emptying the basket, right?
Yep.
Then the next one is to say, okay, so then now you ask me, Doug.
Yeah. Then I can respond to the same question. What's not working for you about me, Mark?
Yeah, exactly. So then I would respond. And I would tell Doug what's not working for me about him, or about whatever the situation is that we're discussing. So then we've got the negative out of the way. What's not working for you? What's not working for me, right? The next stage is what is working, because it's got to be balanced. So I end up saying so Doug, what is working for you? Or what is working for you about the business, or about the situation, or about me?
Yep. And then I would go on and explain in detail. We only have so much time. And then I would say, well, great. Now that I've complimented you, Mark, no, what is working for you about me?
Right. And yeah, it's absolutely that. It can be complementary. It's really important to be genuine, though. It's really important to deliver a message that is what is working for me about you is that you show up on time, and this is, you know, an example of you doing that, or you express your love for me by doing that, or, you know, I really appreciate the fact that you picked up the kids when I couldn't, or whatever, and that's really working for me. That you're taking over some of these things without asking me to do it when you can see that I'm busy, and I just want to appreciate you for those things.
So can I interject here as we keep going through the framework?
Yeah.
So I could imagine my framework's slightly different than this and what I do. I love this. I'm definitely stealing it and adding into it. But I can see somebody going, I'm in the heat of the moment. Maybe it's been an affair or a past something that's happened, or emotional affair from years ago. It's still lingering. And right now in the moment, I just cannot think of anything that's working. It's just not working. I got 1.5 feet out the door. What do we do then, Mark?
What's working for me about this situation or about you right now is nothing.
Yeah.
Let's just tell you the truth.
Yeah. Boom. There you go, guys. So I think that's huge because that creates a clearing. What I've done in the past is I would make the mistake, perhaps, of saying, you know, what's working for me is, and I would look for just something positive. You know, the fact that you care for our children, or what's working for me is the fact that you stay out of my way. You know, the fact that when I come home, you're not around. Do something. I look for something small to add to the compliment. And then I would come up with, but our relationship isn't working, you know?
Yeah. Well, it could be what's working for me right now is the fact that we're having this conversation, that you're willing to be here with me. And that could be all that you mentioned. As I said, I would be completely genuine. I wouldn't blow any smoke at all, because it's not appropriate.
No, not appropriate at all. Great. And so we've gone through what is not working for you. Both parties have divulged that. Then what is working for you? So we've got both sides of that coin. What's next?
Oh, the last part is a catch-all statement. Are you carrying anything? In other words, is there something that, you know, after you hearing me clear, is there something that's come up for you, your subconscious has popped out that you haven't had a chance to say? And often what I found in these sort of situations is that it could be, if somebody's cleared really well, that there's nothing. And it has been in a situation, I've been in situations where are you carrying anything has brought forth the real nugget. It's brought forth, you know, I'm carrying the fact that I'm really sad that our relationship we seem to be distant, and I'd love to do something about it. And then that just, you know, opens the floodgates for a different type of conversation as to where we go from here. And it was necessary to open the floodgates by having that open, honest clearing.
I love it. And it kind of goes through in business, right? The 5 whys. And I can't remember what that came through as a tool. Look at me always relating it back to business, but of constantly asking like what's really going on, and you eventually kind of getting to the root of the issue. What my wife would do, especially early on, I would say, is there anything more? And she'd say, well, that's it for now. Leaving an opening. I'm not, there could be something else coming up. I'm just like, you know, I've given myself an opening to come back to this conversation, coming through there. So I found asking repeatedly, what else? What else? Anything else? Or something along those lines starts to get to the core of the issue of what's really going on, what's really bothering the other person. Yeah.
It's so interesting. I went into a company and they were doing this 5 whys, and the guy asking the 5 whys he's a lovely guy, but he looks like an EFF. No, not EFF. What are the wrestling?
WWF or WWE?
No, the kickboxing guys. You know, the cage fighters.
Okay, yes, UFC.
UFC, yeah, exactly. So he looks like one of those fighters, and he would be like, why? And the guys were in such fear they would say anything to get him off their backs. So I had them remove the 5 whys from their thing and change it to, what, like you said, what else? So exactly, it would be, so what's going on, what challenges have you had, and what else, and what else, and what else can you tell me? So there was no threat, because the why tends to be, why were you late? Why didn't you do your part? And then so we feel guilty. So yeah, so the purpose of the are you carrying anything? It could be something simple, just to get the logistics sorted, or it can be, as I said, to get the nugget out. And there's nothing wrong also with if that person says, well, I feel like I didn't give the first round very much of a shot, and you can go back to what's not working for you, what's not working for me, what is and what is, and do it again. Why not do 2 rounds?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the clearer you get, again, that glass analogy, you want that glass, guys, crystal clear, especially with those relationships that are the most important to you. Yeah. It's going to bring you so much closer. It could be emotional and what have you. And another thing I'll just throw in there is, when you're receiving the information, do everything you can not to be defensive. And what I mean by that is, when you ask your wife, what are you carrying, or what's not working for you, and she comes at you, maybe she's hurt, about what you said or something else, and maybe she says, well, what's not working is our sex life. Like, don't coil up and react. Well, our sex life isn't good because you da 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 da. You're there just to listen with engaged indifference and just take it in. And kind of a technique that we've talked to guys about before is almost watch the scene as if you're watching a movie. And this is not to take yourself out of it emotionally, but so you're not as reactive, because it's easy that, if this is your first time having a clearing conversation, odds are the things that are going to come up are going to be tender, right? Tender for your partner, tender for you. And, we can make things mean something, right? If your wife says, well, our sex life's not working for me, right? Most men equate that to, I'm not good enough. She's going to have an affair. She is having an affair. Who else does she want to sleep with? What am I doing wrong? Is my penis too small? Is it too big? All of these things start going through immediately and through a man's head. And I'm going to recommend, guys, that you just get clarity and ask her, well, why? Can you tell me why that it's not working for you? And dig a little bit deeper into it, but do it calmly, almost like you're an investigative reporter, trying to get to the facts and find out the information. I call it putting your Indiana Jones hat and going on an adventure to really find the clues, to figure out what's happening, rather than sitting back, folding your arms and getting angry and, our sex life's not good because you put on 10 pounds and da-da-da-da. You're going into a victim mode and blaming the other person. That's not what this is about. This is about clearing the glass between 2 people that care about each other, right? It may be your mates, it may be, your wife, it may be something else, but you're there. Remember the intent of this conversation when you sit down. So Mark, what else can we leave these guys with? We gave them the framework. We can do an example of one, but we kind of did a mock there. And we don't have a couple hours for you to tell me what's not working about me. So joking aside, what are some of the other tips and pro tips that these guys might want to take with them when they start this process?
Well, you brought up a really important thing there, I think, Doug. If you are triggered and she says something about our sex life is not working for me. Firstly, it could mean that she wants a better sex life. So, if you are triggered because of your own insecurities, doesn't mean you're right, firstly. Secondly, if you want to discuss those, I wouldn't do it in the clearing. I would keep quiet and let her clear, and then carry on, work through the process. And then when she says, are you carrying anything? Because you say, ask me, I'm going to ask you, are you carrying anything? And then she'll ask you, I'm carrying what you said about our sex life, and I'd really like to understand what it is that isn't working for you, and maybe you can share that with me. That's where I would place that. So I wouldn't interject or try and confuse the process by putting it in the middle. Other tips, Doug. For me, the clearing conversation as we've said, could be at a level 2 out of 10, or it could be a 9.5 out of 10. It could be a make or break relationship clearing conversation, or it could be, you didn't do the dishes on when you said you would. So it's really important that you also prepare the person that you're having a conversation with for that conversation. So, if it's a make or break kind of conversation, I wouldn't sort of say, can we meet at 3:00 and just, leave it at that, and it would feel like an ambush. I would, as Doug said earlier on, I would prepare the person and say, this is something that's really important. It's about our relationship. I've got some strong feelings. If you need to, and I would love us to be really clear and mature and adult about this. If you need to go and, take a walk, or you want to clear your head beforehand, I'd love it if we can meet in a place where we're both feeling constructive and we can get some value.
I absolutely love that. And I'm going to add that step back in. I'm going to take my other step out of the framework of trying to get clear in the middle and stop trying to be so reactive and do that. And at the end of that conversation, how do we want to end it? How do we want to end this conversation? What are what do we want to do at the end of this clearing conversation, whether it be a level 2 or a level 10 coming through it?
Yeah. So for me, it's you'll have heard me before, Doug. I'm very big on agreements. So it would be a case of some stuff came up in this conversation. Shall we sleep on it and then talk about it some more tomorrow? Do we agree that we're going to have another conversation? Doesn't have to be a clearing conversation. Could be just a clarifying conversation in terms of what came up in a different way, or to get on the same page. But I would make an agreement about a follow-up. I wouldn't just leave it if there needs to be a follow-up. If it's clear and we've reached resolution, then it may well be that there's cause for celebration, and you want to mark it by having a meal together or something like that. It often will, in fact, in my experience, end up, as Doug said earlier, in greater intimacy, greater connection, and understanding of one another. Therefore, it's to be appreciated and celebrated, but definitely create some agreements.
I love it. Mark, this is an amazing framework. You've given me some things to chew on as well here that I'm going to take into my relationship is going through. As we're recording this, I can hear kids running and bouncing and jumping off the walls upstairs above us. And it's so fun. I'm going to sit my 3-year-old down and have a clearing conversation with him about that. No, obviously I jest, but in coming through this, guys, I really recommend that you go back through here and take what Mark has said of this framework and write it down. Put it on an index card or a cue card as you're looking through this, and really get this honed in and practice, right? The framework works. It's like a recipe, I would say, Mark, isn't it? It's like if you're baking a cake, you don't just, listen to the recipe and then go out there and try to do a master type thing going through there and seeing that and going through. So it's really a matter of getting it all together. Until you become a master chef, you're always going back to the recipe book, right? You're always going back to the cookbook, writing the recipe down. Once you've mastered, and I do mean mastered the recipe as it is, then you can start modifying and playing with it to find something that works for you. But that's after you've mastered it.
Yeah, so it's very simple. It's create the agreement, set up the conversation. What works for you? What works for me? What doesn't work for you? What doesn't work for me? Are you carrying anything? If you can just remember those 4 ingredients.
Love it. And guys, we'll put those down in the Facebook group. If you go over there, it's the Powerful Man free group. Mark's in there as well. So you'll see him every once in a while chiming in, as well as myself, Tim, and the other coaches. Mark, I want to thank you so much for being here, man. I've learned a lot and I've taken a lot out of this, and it's always fun having a conversation with you. So thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Doug. It's always great to catch up. And like I said earlier, I'm so looking forward to, and I keep saying it, coming and riding trails in Oregon with you on my mountain bike.
I look forward to it, my friend. All right. Gentlemen, that's another episode of The Powerful Man Show. As always, go over to thepowerfulman.com/bonus, where you can get a free training for yourself. Put these things into action, guys. Really easy to listen to podcast. watch a YouTube video or what have you, get inspired, get a piece of advice, and not take action. Don't be that guy. Be the 1% who takes decisive action each and every time so you can progress on your journey. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time on The Powerful Man Show.